The doors were locked, her daughter's name stripped off the wall. Lisa screamed at the nurse, "Where's my office?" From the lobby balcony, Eleanor watched in silence, flanked by board members she handpicked. 30 years of silence had finally paid off. She wasn't the patient anymore. She was the owner, and the reckoning had just begun. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. I wasn't confused, I wasn't old. I was in pain. And I heard every word. The fluorescent ceiling lights buzzed faintly above Eleanor's bed, the sterile white sheets tucked too tightly across her aching body. The dull throb in her side from the laparoscopic procedure wasn't the worst pain she'd felt today. Not by a long shot. Behind her closed eyelids, she heard the door click open, then pause. Rubber soles shuffled forward cautiously. "Vitals are stable," said a gentle female voice. "Nurse Camille, the night shift." Eleanor liked her. She smelled faintly of citrus lotion and had a softness to her voice that reminded Eleanor of her late sister. Then, another voice, crisp, cold, calculated. "Don't bother unless it's critical," Lisa said in a hushed tone. "I don't want her getting used to attention, she'll milk it." Eleanor's breath slowed. She didn't flinch. She'd perfected the art of stillness long ago. Decades of observing boardroom deals and reading people without them realizing they were being watched. The nurse hesitated. "Ma'am, with all due respect, she's just post-op. She's always just something," Lisa snapped. "Just tired, just overwhelmed, just old. I know my mother. She plays the part." The conversation trailed off as footsteps receded into the hallway. The door clicked shut. Eleanor waited. 10 slow breaths. The ache in her stomach wasn't just from surgery anymore. It was the hollow burn of betrayal. She hadn't expected warmth from Lisa, not lately. But this disregard, this quiet cruelty? Her memory flashed. 6 months ago, sitting at the kitchen table, pen trembling in her hand. Lisa had cried then. Said she was drowning under clinic bills, needed access to Eleanor's accounts, just temporarily. Said it was only until patient reimbursements cleared. Said, "You'll always have control, Mom." Eleanor remembered the pressure in her chest, the pit in her gut. But she signed anyway, because that's what mothers do when daughters look scared. Now, the woman who once clung to her hand as a child was treating her like a liability. A faint beep from her monitor reminded her. She was being watched, just not cared for. The room was quiet again. No nurses, no daughter. Just the subtle hum of medical machinery and the slow rise and fall of her chest beneath the thin hospital gown. Somewhere in the hallway, someone laughed. Not Lisa, someone lighter, less guarded. Eleanor opened her eyes, slowly. The world came back into focus. The fourth, the water jug she couldn't reach, the dinner tray still untouched. Her glasses sat at the edge of the nightstand, deliberately out of reach. Her fingers twitched. So that was the game now. They thought she was fading, that she wouldn't notice the unfiled paperwork, the diverted mail, the lack of return calls from her financial planner. They'd mistaken her silence for surrender, mistaken her stillness for weakness. But Eleanor had not forgotten who she was before the soft sweaters, the pill trays, the polite nods in waiting rooms. She hadn't always been Mom or Ma'am or the patient. There were years when she signed contracts, led task forces, managed logistics for hospitals bigger than the one she was lying in now. She had buried her brilliance in the name of family. Now, she would unearth it, brick by legal brick. She turned her head slowly toward the window. The blinds were tilted just enough to let moonlight slice across the tile floor. The world outside went on, unaware that a war had just been declared in room 212. She whispered, her voice dry and low, so quiet even the machines didn't register it. "Game on." Eleanor opens her eyes slowly, alone, and whispers, "Game on." It wasn't just my body hurting. It was what they thought they could get away with. The pain wasn't sharp today. It hovered, dull and constant, like a low tide pulling at her ribs. Eleanor sat in the high-backed chair near the clinic lobby, bundled in a shawl that wasn't hers. It smelled like Lisa. Artificial vanilla and entitlement. Across the room, Lisa's voice filtered through the glass-paneled office, bright and sugary. "She's adjusting, but it's hard," she said into her phone. "Caring for my aging mother is draining, emotionally, financially, spiritually." Eleanor blinked, slow and deliberate. The phone on Lisa's desk lit up. A notification flashed. "New comment on your post. Sending you love, Lisa. You're a saint." Eleanor turned her head just enough to see her reflection in the window. Her hair, once steel gray and proud, now looked tired. She gently pulled the shawl tighter, not because she was cold, but to hide the way her fists clenched underneath. "Saint," she whispered. "Interesting spelling for thief." Over the next few days, she began what she called her soft act. Not lies, just permissions. She asked the same question twice at breakfast. She paused in doorways like she forgot where she was going. During Lisa's weekly dinner party with friends from the clinic, Eleanor wandered into the living room mid-toast and stared at the wall like it held secrets. "Oh, Mom," Lisa said, forcing a laugh, glass raised. "She has her little spells." "Bless her," one of the nurses added. "It's sweet she still wants to be involved." Eleanor smiled at them, vacant-eyed. Then shuffled slowly back down the hallway, where she promptly wrote down every name, every expression, every insult. Her memory wasn't slipping, it was storing. And testing herself was a daily ritual now. She would open a book to a random page each morning, memorize a line, then repeat it at night. She began stacking mail by postmark date, alphabetizing spice jars in her room, and deliberately switching the channels on Lisa's television just to see if she'd notice. Lisa didn't. What Eleanor did notice was that the envelopes coming in were thinner, lighter, and the bills from her last specialist appointment, ones she'd expected, never arrived. One afternoon, when Lisa left for an overnight wellness retreat, Eleanor limped into the study with her cane, opened the desk drawer, and found what she feared: invoices addressed to Eleanor G. Dalton, routed to a P.O. box owned by Dalton Clinic Holdings, LLC, Lisa's company. Not the insurance, not the billing agency. Lisa. She flipped through them, her hands steady despite the pulse in her throat. Lab charges, physical therapy copays. Even her prescription receipts were being rerouted and paid out of what appeared to be her original trust account. Eleanor let out a breath. South. That's how Lisa funded the weekly wine deliveries, the clinic rebrand, the yoga studio partnership. From her pain. The next morning, Eleanor took her routine walk through the building's main hallway. She paused near the front desk. The receptionist was out back, probably smoking. Lisa's door was closed. She heard laughter echo from inside. Something about podcast sponsorships. Eleanor waited until the coast was clear, then slipped behind the desk and picked up the landline. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. For a moment, she hesitated. It had been years since she'd called anyone other than a doctor or pharmacy, but her memory reached back like an old friend. She dialed. "Burrell and Maynard, attorneys at law, this is Jenna speaking." "Jenna," Eleanor said softly. "Tell Mr. Maynard that Eleanor Dalton is requesting a callback." "Ms. Dalton, it's been years." "I know, and it's about time." She hung up just as the front door opened. Lisa stepped in, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Oh, Mom," she said with mock surprise, "you wandered again. Reception's not your room, remember?" Eleanor smiled sweetly and nodded. "Yes, dear," she said. "I just turned around." But inside, everything had just snapped into place. Eleanor sneaks a call to her old estate attorney using the clinic's landline. "They thought I forgot what I built, but I kept every receipt." The old storage unit was colder than she remembered. Dust clung to the metal roll-up door like a second lock, reluctant to let go. Eleanor punched in the 6-digit code with a shaky but sure hand. The door groaned open with the sound of age and resistance. She stood at the threshold, staring at the rows of carefully labeled bins, aging banker boxes, and stacks of brittle filing folders packed during the year after her husband's death. So many items had been left untouched, not because she forgot, but because she hadn't needed to remember. Until now. A sharp ache bloomed in her hip as she stepped inside. Her flashlight beam cut through the dimness, catching on a box that didn't match the others. black leatherette instead of cardboard. No dust, no label, except a gold-embossed sticker on the front, faded but legible. Mid-Health Holdings, LLC. Eleanor stared at it, her breath shallow. She hadn't heard that name in over a decade. A flashback unfurled in her mind like a film reel. Lisa had just graduated med school, burnt out and full of grand ideas. Eleanor remembered sitting across the dining table, napkin in hand, as her daughter paced the kitchen listing demands. A space of my own, clean branding, natural light, no hospital red tape. She remembered the blank commercial property form in front of her. She'd offered to help, not just emotionally, but structurally, strategically, legally. She was no stranger to contracts. She'd helped build hospital logistics departments from scratch. She didn't donate her savings. She invested. "Let's create an LLC," she had said. "It'll protect you. And me." Back then, Lisa had nodded, distracted, eager, but when the clinic opened, her name never went on the front door. Only Lisa's did, and Eleanor, out of maternal pride or foolishness, had never asked why. Now, decades later, she placed the lockbox on a stack of storage tubs and slowly lifted the lid. The smell of ink and paper filled the air, like walking into a library where every book was her own secret. Inside were 3 manila folders, the first labeled Articles of Incorporation, Mid-Health Holdings, the second, Lease and Deed, Primary Property, and the third, Transfer Exceptions, Minority Investor Rights. Eleanor's fingers trembled, but not from fear. She flipped open the property deed. Her name was there, clear as sunrise, and beneath it, in legal black and white, majority interest, 51%. She didn't need to read the rest to understand. All this time, while Lisa bragged about owning the clinic, she'd been operating inside a building that belonged, legally, to her mother. The final paper was handwritten, tucked between 2 notarized forms, a note from her late husband, Gerald. "If Lisa ever forgets where she came from, this box won't. Love always, G." Her throat tightened, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not here, not now. By the time she made it back to her car, dusk had spilled across the sky like bruised silk. She buckled in, placed the box on the passenger seat like it was holy, and dialed her attorney. It rang twice. "Maynard speaking." "Robert," she said, her voice steady. "I found the Mid-Health files." Silence. "You're telling me you still have those?" "I never throw away leverage," Eleanor said dryly. He laughed under his breath. "You realize what this means?" "I'm her landlord." "Technically, yes. And if I pull the lease structure and we can prove operational misappropriation?" He paused. "You could file for breach, trigger an audit, freeze her accounts." Eleanor looked ahead at the quiet road, at the woman in the mirror she barely recognized anymore. "Then let's audit," she said. "We'll need a forensic firm. Discreet. I want it done yesterday." There was silence on the line, then the smile in Maynard's voice returned. "God, I missed working with you." Eleanor didn't smile back. Not yet. But her hand gripped the steering wheel like she was holding a scalpel. She wasn't confused. She wasn't frail. She was building a case. Eleanor requests a forensic audit of the clinic's finances. She called it dramatics. I called it documentation. The first entry Eleanor wrote was with a shaking hand, not from weakness, but fury. Monday, 6:14 a.m. Pain level, 7 out of 10. Asked for acetaminophen. Nurse said orders pending. Lisa walked by twice. No eye contact. No acknowledgement. Silence stings worse than surgery. She closed the notebook, slid it beneath her pillow, and rolled over as though nothing happened. Each day that followed, she wrote more. Dates, times, tone of voice, missed medication, passive-aggressive remarks. Her handwriting grew sharper with each line. It wasn't just a diary, it was evidence. Every page was a scalpel. Eleanor didn't lash out. She didn't argue. She simply watched. One night, she began to fake sleepwalking. Shuffling into the hallway under the pale glow of nightlights, she passed by the guest room, Lisa's version of a rest suite, where she often hosted colleagues for networking cocktails. The door was cracked. Eleanor paused in the shadow, pressing against the wall like she'd learned decades ago in emergency evacuation drills. Still, breath shallow, ears alert. Laughter spilled out like spilled wine. "She asks for pain meds like it's a 5-star hotel," one voice said, feminine, sharp-edged. Lisa's voice followed, syrupy and smug. "It's like playing house with a mannequin. Easy to gaslight, she doesn't even remember what day it is." The room erupted in snorts and giggles. Eleanor pressed her nails into her palm, grounding herself with pain that wasn't surgical. "You'll remember this," she told herself. She tiptoed back down the hall, not making a sound. She'd long ago learned that silence was the most potent form of resistance. By Thursday, she had filled 22 pages. The more she wrote, the more she noticed. The breakfast tray with supplements that mysteriously never made it to her room. The way her name had been swapped on medical labels, from Eleanor Hartley to E.L. Hart, to confuse insurance tracking. The pill bottles refilled too soon, or too late. The nurse, Stacy, was jumpy, too jumpy, always looking over her shoulder, always glancing toward Lisa's office before responding. Then came the final straw. One afternoon, Eleanor waited until Lisa left for a clinic board lunch, then quietly searched her own patient folder in the medical office system. The desk staff barely looked up. She still wore the quiet authority of a woman who used to run departments. Inside her digital chart, new prescriptions listed under her name. Antidepressants, sleep sedatives, a mild antipsychotic, none of which she'd ever taken. None of which had been prescribed by a third-party physician, signed electronically by Lisa Hart, MD. Her breath hitched. When Eleanor told Maynard, her lawyer, his voice sharpened instantly. "Do not confront her. Not yet." "I wasn't planning to," Eleanor said. "I'm not done recording." "She's committing medical fraud, potential criminal charges." Eleanor stared at the blinking cursor on her screen, where her journal now had a digital twin, password-protected, geotagged. "I want her to hang herself with her own arrogance," Eleanor replied, voice steady. "Let her think I'm still small." There was a pause on the line. "You've changed." "No," Eleanor said. "I just remembered who I was before motherhood made me quiet." By the time the forensic audit team arrived, Lisa was oblivious, still basking in the glow of social media clout, still hosting luncheons and calling Eleanor mom when donors were nearby. But Eleanor knew. She knew the numbers wouldn't lie. The secret staff bonuses signed by Lisa, the unexplained travel reimbursements billed to clinic funds, the medication invoices under Eleanor's name. She waited. And when Maynard called 1 week later, his voice had that lethal, calm lawyers use when the blade is sharpened. "It's confirmed," he said. "Misappropriation. Clinic funds. Under Lisa's name." Eleanor stood at her window, watching clouds gather over the city skyline. She didn't smile. She underlined her final diary entry for the day. Audit confirmed. Lisa's hands are dirty. The audit reveals financial misappropriation in Lisa's name. They forged the paperwork. But they forgot the woman who ran logistics at a hospital for 30 years. The printer sputtered like a cough as the sheet fed out. Eleanor picked it up, hands steady, eyes cold. It was the so-called power of attorney, a document Lisa had quietly submitted to gain full financial control over her affairs. Her lawyer had obtained a copy through back channels. Eleanor studied the signature at the bottom. It looked like hers. It even had the tiny loop in the E that most wouldn't catch. But one problem remained. "I've never seen this in my life," she whispered. Then louder to herself this time, "I signed nothing." She placed the forged document beside one of her real forms from 5 years ago. The ink strokes were close, but not perfect. She'd trained surgeons to read fine print on patient transfer protocols in her prime. She knew what real authority looked like, and what it didn't. Her lawyer, Maynard, sat across from her in her hospital room turned war bunker. "We'll need to prove forgery." Eleanor didn't look up. "That's why I'm installing a camera tonight." By midnight, she was awake in the dim-lit room, screwing a small black lens into the vent above her bed. The camera had motion sensitivity, cloud storage, and a wide-angle lens, gifts from a friend she'd once helped save during an insurance audit meltdown, old favors, new firepower. The next morning, Eleanor stayed perfectly still under the sheets, pretending to sleep as Lisa entered with a nurse named Haley. "Her chart's too detailed," Lisa murmured. "She logs everything," Haley replied, voice low, nervous. Lisa huffed. "Then we'll make a new one, just enough to show cognitive decline, nothing too dramatic. We'll lose the rest." Haley hesitated. "That's dangerous." "So is getting fired." Lisa's voice turned ice sharp. "This is still my clinic." Eleanor's heart thudded. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp. She just listened and waited. The moment Lisa left, Eleanor sat up, clicked the remote on the hidden monitor tucked under her mattress, and replayed the entire scene. By Thursday, her lawyer had more than a case. He had evidence and motive, and a livid, laser-focused client. "She's walking herself straight into fraud charges," Maynard said. "But you need to be careful. The more you show your hand now, the faster she'll pivot." "I know," Eleanor said, nodding as she tucked her camera behind a stack of folded towels. "I just want her to believe she's still winning." Maynard handed her an envelope. "Certified. Your updated will. Do with it what you like." Eleanor looked down at the legal seal. The weight of it was heavier than the paper. She'd rewritten everything. Her assets, her clinic shares, her home deed. Weeks earlier, before Lisa ever thought to lock the filing cabinets, everything had gone into a private family trust, and not $1 of it, not 1 square foot of her property, was going to Lisa. That evening, Eleanor wheeled herself to the mailroom on the second floor of the building, envelope in hand. The nurse offered to take it for her. "No, dear," she said sweetly. "Some things I mail myself." She slipped the certified will into the chute addressed, "To herself," a legal timestamp, a sealed record, undeniable in court. Her fingers lingered on the metal for a moment, then pulled away. Back upstairs, Lisa breezed in with fake concern and a new manicure. "You look tired, Mom. You should rest. Maybe stop reading so much. It messes with your head." Eleanor smiled. "Oh, I'm resting just fine." Lisa tilted her head. "I told the staff to simplify your charts. You don't need to stress about details." Eleanor reached slowly for her water glass, raised it slightly, and said with a calm edge, "Funny. I've always been the details." Lisa blinked, unsure how to respond. Eleanor took a sip. Behind her, the vent lens blinked red. Eleanor mails a certified copy of her will to herself. They smiled for donations. I watched from the shadows. The chandeliers sparkled like champagne glass shards above the banquet tables, each one wrapped in pastel linens and gold-edged menus reading, "Hope and Healing, an Evening of Resilience." And there, center stage in a velvet gown the color of ripe berries, stood Lisa, smiling like she'd lived the pain she was profiting from. "She's a survivor," the MC announced with reverence. "Her courage in helping her aging mother through a difficult health journey. It's why this clinic stands today." Polite applause swelled through the ballroom. Lisa touched her heart, eyes shimmering with carefully prepped tears. In the very back, near the catering table where no one paid attention, Eleanor sat with a wig of salt and pepper curls, square glasses too large for her face, and a simple black dress. She held a flute of untouched sparkling water, the stems steady in her fingers. Every cell in her body burned, but not with pain. No, that was managed. What scorched her now was betrayal dressed in pearls. She watched Lisa soak in praise from philanthropists and pharmaceutical reps, arms linked with board members Eleanor had once helped recruit. "You built this," she reminded herself, "and now she's repainting it in her name." A burst of laughter caught Eleanor's attention from the next table. A woman in her mid-40s holding a camera bag leaned toward her. "Some of these speeches feel like a Netflix drama." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Ever cover anything more factual?" The woman laughed. "I used to, actually. Back in the day, covered city grants and small clinic growth, even interviewed a woman named Eleanor Shaw who co-wrote the funding proposal for this place, back when it was just a dream." Eleanor's lips curled ever so slightly. "That name still mean something?" the journalist asked, curious. Eleanor leaned in just enough to let the light catch her real eyes under the glasses. What if I told you she was here tonight, watching her name get traded like a stock? The journalist's breath hitched. Are you serious? Eleanor nodded once. You want the real story? What's the catch? One condition, Eleanor said, voice calm. You publish every word without sending it to her PR team first. The woman hesitated for only a second. Deal. By midnight, Eleanor was back in her suite, the wig resting on her vanity like an empty husk. Her real hair, silver-streaked and pinned tight, fell over her shoulders. She sat at her desk with a cup of mint tea, email open, cursor blinking. Attached were photos, a scanned deed, a memo between her and Lisa detailing co-ownership terms, and one line from a transcript. Lisa, laughing, saying, "She's a good prop when she's not talking too much." She hit send, then she sipped her tea, savoring the stillness before the avalanche. The next morning, Lisa's gala photos were still trending, until a new headline shattered the algorithm. Clinic built on a lie, founder's mother claims deception, misuse, and forgery. The thumbnail photo was from the gala, Eleanor blurred in the background, Lisa mid-speech, smiling wide. In the article, quotes from former patients, early donors, and even a retired nurse echoed Eleanor's story. The journalist had worked fast and thoroughly. Lisa's phone began to ring before breakfast. Emails poured in. Her board group chat exploded. But the most unread message of all came from an email labeled Silent Equity, MidHealth Holdings. She didn't open it. The story publishes next morning. Clinic built on a lie? She called me fragile, but I was just focused. The vase on Eleanor's windowsill had never held fresh flowers, not in years. But this morning, it bloomed. A bundle of deep purple irises, delicate, proud, resilient, stood tall in the sunlight. No card, no sender name, just a folded note taped to the glass. You helped me walk again. Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Eleanor's hand lingered on the petals, fingers trembling, not from weakness, but from the weight of memory. Down the hall, Lisa's voice was shrill and breaking. Reschedule all appointments until further notice. Yes, all of them. Just say the doctor is under review, I don't care. Eleanor stepped back, the smile tugging at her lips, restrained but sharp. Word had spread. Fast. The article's headline had morphed from whispers into a wildfire, and patients, once loyal to Lisa's polished charm, were canceling by the hour. The receptionist phone rang less now. Nurses moved slow, warier. The whole building had gone quieter. Not silent, just listening. Lisa stomped past the doorway that afternoon, phone glued to her ear, voice dripping panic. It's slander. It's all exaggerated. I am the clinic. Without me, it's just drywall and sick people. Eleanor sat calmly, a blanket on her lap, a journal on her knees. She didn't flinch. That evening, just before lights dimmed for rest hours, a knock tapped softly on her room's door. It opened. Amy, the quiet night nurse with the tired eyes and kind smile, stepped in, her uniform wrinkled, her expression different this time. Hardened. Unafraid. I'm leaving, Amy said, effective immediately. Eleanor set the journal aside. That's brave. No, Amy whispered. What you're doing is brave. I should have said something sooner. She stepped closer, pulling something from the front pocket of her coat. A flash drive. I recorded 3 weeks of staff meetings, Amy said, including the one where Dr. Lisa told us to downplay your vitals if you buzzed too often, said you were high maintenance and would burn out the sympathy. Eleanor didn't blink. She just reached out and took it, as if Amy had handed her a spoon. There's one more thing, Amy added. She threatened me, twice, told me if I didn't stop siding with the patient, I'd be written up. I didn't report it because, well, you've seen the power she throws around. Eleanor nodded slowly. You're doing the right thing now. Amy hesitated, then added, My grandmother adored you. You helped her apply for senior aid back when no one else gave her the time of day. She used to call you her second daughter. Eleanor blinked, the first sign of emotion cracking beneath her armor. Amy squeezed her hand. Time to let the world meet that woman again. The next morning, Eleanor sat upright, dressed in slate gray slacks and a navy cardigan, her hair neatly braided back. She waited until the building was alive but distracted, phones ringing, Lisa pacing. She walked, unhurried, to the main administrator's office. The door was unlocked. Inside, a receptionist looked up, startled. "I need a notary on file," Eleanor said. "This is a formal complaint to the state medical board." She handed over the envelope. Inside, copies of the audio files, Lisa's forged prescriptions, Amy's statement, Eleanor's medical records marked adjusted, and 2 surveillance stills of Lisa coaching the nurse to falsify a chart. "Please ensure it's received today," Eleanor added, "by 4 p.m. The receptionist, eyes wide, nodded. As Eleanor left the office, she passed Lisa in the hallway. Lisa froze. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor looked her daughter up and down. Designer blazer wrinkled, mascara smudged under stressed eyes, heels scuffed. "I live here, don't I?" Eleanor said softly. "Just not under you." Lisa scoffed. "You won't win this, you know?" Eleanor paused. "I'm not trying to win, Lisa," she said. "I'm just trying to heal what you broke." Eleanor files a formal complaint with the medical board. She was too busy cashing checks to notice the terms. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, weighty, the kind of paper that meant the sender had power and patience. Lisa barely looked at it. It arrived on a Thursday morning, wedged between a bundle of glossy invoices and the couriered bakery treats she insisted on for her staff. She gave it a quick glance, misread the lack of return address as irrelevance, and tossed it into her review later tray like it was just another patient survey. She didn't realize it wasn't sent by a stranger. It was from the woman who had once signed the first lease, the one she now called non-essential. Eleanor sat 3 blocks away at a small cafe window table, fingers gently wrapped around a warm porcelain mug. Across from her sat her real estate attorney and a property inspector, both polite, both stunned by the depth of her documentation. "You understand what this means?" the inspector asked. If she made even a single monetized modification to the clinic without co-owner consent, "She did," Eleanor replied calmly. "She filmed 6 paid brand campaigns from the second-floor break room, turned it into a media studio, removed 2 exam tables, rented it out to a startup weight loss program without a permit." The inspector nodded, scribbling into a notepad. "We'll confirm, but if the terms are as you say—" "They are," Eleanor said, placing a worn folder on the table. "My husband wrote that lease himself. He was always one for hidden gems." Back at the clinic, Lisa breezed into her office, distracted and fuming. Her phone screen flashed with unread emails and declining social media analytics. One of her newer investors had texted, "Need to chat, concerns about optics." She didn't have time for cryptic threats. Not when the gala blowback still lingered like stale perfume and 2 nurses had quit within the same week. She snapped her fingers at her assistant. "Check the business loan file again. I need to know why my monthly draw hasn't cleared." 10 minutes later, her assistant returned, pale and stuttering. "They froze it," she said. Lisa blinked. "What?" "The clinic loan. Midstate Holdings flagged a co-owner contract violation. They're doing a clause review." Lisa's chest tightened. "Co-owner?" Her mouth formed the word like it was poisonous. She stormed to her filing cabinet, yanking open drawers and rifling through lease agreements. Everything blurred into ink and panic until she spotted the clause, buried in Section 13. Clause 13. B. Any material change to property use for commercial purposes must be reviewed and approved by both owners. Violation of this clause may result in financial suspension or investigation. Her vision blurred, her hands trembled, but not from fear, from rage. 3 days later, an official-looking SUV pulled into the clinic lot. A man in a navy windbreaker stepped out, clipboard in hand. The receptionist didn't know what to do with him. Lisa came charging down the hallway in heels far too loud for her mood. "Can I help you?" The man smiled. "Property inspection. You were notified by mail." Lisa's face contorted. "There's been some mistake." "No mistake," he said, showing her the signed authorization. "There's a co-owner request on file, says she's concerned about the building's compliance status." "Who?" Lisa barked. The inspector raised a brow. "Name's on the deed, Ms. Holt. Eleanor Shaw. You'd be surprised how airtight her paperwork is." From her window across the street, Eleanor watched. The sign on the building still read, Holt Wellness Clinic, but not for long. Her fingers tapped against her cane, rhythmic, calm. Every beat counted. Every beat reminded her. They hadn't taken anything she hadn't let them. Lisa hadn't even read the letter. And now she'd have to explain to the board why her clinic had just received a notice of inspection and pending foreclosure review. Clinic receives legal notice, inspection and partial foreclosure incoming. They didn't see the nurse with a conscience. I did. The confession wasn't planned. It started with a trembling hand holding a phone too long. A single video. Shaky, grainy, but undeniable. Nurse Amy's face appeared on screen, her scrubs wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed, her voice barely more than a whisper. She looked straight into the camera and said, I can't stay quiet anymore. By the end of the night, it had 47,000 views. Lisa slammed her laptop shut. Her face, once powdered for perfection, now glistened with panic sweat. Damage control, she muttered. It's just a disgruntled employee. But the world didn't see it that way. Amy's video included time-stamped notes, patient complaints that went ignored, audio of Lisa barking orders like, if she's still conscious, she's fine, and most damning of all, recorded phone footage from the hallway outside Eleanor's recovery room. Lisa. Just dose her lightly. We don't need her fully lucid. If she asks questions, just say it's post-op fog. Amy had layered her voiceover with chilling clarity. I watched a woman get treated like she was already gone, but she wasn't. She was listening, and so was I. By noon the next day, hashtags exploded. Protect Eleanor, anti-clinic cover-up. Amy was there. Eleanor watched it unfold from her armchair, the sunlight pouring onto her lap like warm applause. The tablet rested gently in her palm, screen glowing with reposts and comment threads that ran miles deep. She didn't smile, she simply nodded. Amy had finally made her move, and the next one would be Eleanor's. Lisa held a frantic emergency meeting in the clinic's boardroom, though half the chairs were empty. She's mentally unstable, she hissed. Amy has no real evidence. Her remaining staff exchanged glances. Those recordings sounded pretty real, said Dr. Hernandez quietly. Context, Lisa snapped, pounding the table. It was all taken out of context. But no one was defending her. Not anymore. And when a manila envelope arrived mid-meeting, delivered by courier, addressed to the board, it felt like a funeral had entered the room. Inside, a typed anonymous letter and a thumb drive. The letter read, To whom it may concern, the attached audio and timestamps confirm repeated ethical violations committed by Lisa Holt under her capacity as clinic director. Signed, a former patient and silent partner. The name wasn't printed. It didn't have to be. Everyone knew who wrote it. Hours later, a call came from the state attorney general's office. Eleanor had made sure of it. They'd received the anonymous tip she sent the week before, along with supporting documents, footage, and medical records. Everything tied to one address, the Holt Wellness Clinic. Now it had a different label. Under investigation. The medical board convened within 72 hours. Lisa arrived in a pantsuit far too sharp for the bags under her eyes. Her makeup looked sprayed on. Her voice, for the first time, trembled. I never intended harm, she said into the microphone. These allegations are based on edited material and vendettas. The patient in question, my mother, has a known history of dramatizing minor issues. One of the board members leaned forward. Is that the same patient who funded your clinic's initial property lease? Silence. Then, yes. And the same patient who appears in the footage, ignored while in visible post-operative distress? Lisa stammered, but it was already over. The board chair lifted a folder. Effective immediately, your medical license is suspended pending full investigation. Lisa's mouth dropped open, but no sound came. Outside, reporters waited. In the back of the parking lot, Eleanor sat inside a sedan, watching her daughter through binoculars she hadn't used since a bird-watching retreat 5 years ago. She didn't enjoy it, but she needed to witness it. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was as quiet as a woman watching her legacy reclaim its breath. Lisa's license is temporarily suspended. She called me useless. I watched her office go dark. The clinic parking lot, once a carousel of luxury SUVs and health-conscious influencers in yoga pants, stood eerily quiet. A single pigeon waddled near the curb, pecking at crumbs beneath the "Wellness Starts Within" sign, its pastel lettering now faded by months of neglect and heat. Inside, Lisa's office lights were off. They hadn't been switched on in over a week, not since the suspension, not since everything began unraveling, faster than she could script a defense. Eleanor stood behind a tinted window on the second floor, her hands wrapped loosely around a ceramic mug. The tea inside had long gone cold, but the warmth in her eyes hadn't. Her gaze was fixed on the empty desk below, the same one where Lisa had once dictated marketing plans while ignoring patient complaints. The room was still, save for the low hum of the HVAC and the echo of her own breath. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to ensure it was real. And it was. Lisa's nameplate had already been removed. A faint rectangular outline marked where it had rested, years of arrogance now reduced to ghosted brass. 2 days earlier. "Eleanor Holt?" asked the suited man as he extended a firm hand. He was tall, mid-40s, and spoke with the measured cadence of someone used to billion-dollar boardrooms. "I'm Mark Leland. We're interested in acquiring the building, specifically for conversion into a nonprofit eldercare facility." Eleanor blinked, quiet. Then slowly, she nodded. "You'll have to meet one clause," she said. Mark leaned forward. "Anything." "She can't be on the board," Eleanor said plainly. "Lisa Holt, no involvement, not as a figurehead, not as a consultant, not even in a newsletter quote." He paused, processing. Then, "Done." She signed without ceremony. No press, no ribbon, no shaking hands over champagne. Just blue ink across the dotted line. It was the first time Eleanor had ever signed something for herself, and only herself. Lisa, meanwhile, was burning what little credibility she had left. She'd sent emails to investors promising a comeback, claiming Amy's video was digitally altered, that the lease drama was just a misunderstanding, and that her beloved clinic would be under new management. Her own, of course. But management never came. Investors didn't reply, and the building's deed had a new name. The morning of the takeover, Eleanor arrived early. There were no crowds, no press, just her and the locksmith, who gave a small, respectful nod when she showed the updated documentation. He popped the old lock like it was nothing. "Want the original key back?" he asked, holding it out on a flat palm. She stared at it a moment, then closed his fingers over it gently. "No need. Let it go." At 9:12 a.m., Lisa pulled into the parking lot in a sleek, leased Audi, the last remaining artifact of her once polished brand. She wore oversized sunglasses and a blazer a touch too expensive for the situation. As she reached the glass doors, her fob didn't beep. She tried again. Nothing. The small sticker in the corner of the entrance was new. Under new ownership, Eleanor Wellness Property Group. Her face froze. Her keycard fell from her hand, clattering to the pavement like punctuation at the end of a sentence she hadn't written. She pounded the door once, twice. "Open the damn door!" she hissed. Inside, Eleanor stood in the shadows of the second floor, still unseen. She didn't lift a finger. She didn't blink. She just watched the woman who had once called her a burden, a relic, a complication, now reduced to shouting at her own reflection in the glass. Lisa arrives to find new locks on the clinic doors. "She never expected me to be the one not picking up." The phone buzzed again. 5th time in 10 minutes. Eleanor didn't look at it. She simply lowered the lid of her laptop, steam rising from her teacup like a slow exhale. She sat in a worn leather chair near the large bay window of her condo, wrapped in a navy shawl. A record played low in the background, Frank Sinatra, slow and wistful. The city moved on outside like it always had, but for Eleanor, everything had already shifted. The calls kept coming. Lisa, Lisa, Lisa. Each one ignored, deliberately, not out of vengeance, but to preserve peace. Lisa had been calling since the locks changed, since the moment her reflection in the clinic glass revealed something she hadn't prepared for. Powerlessness. What followed was a storm. Her lawyer dumped her. Sponsors deleted their partnerships. She couldn't find a medical center to partner with. And now, with the bank demanding back payments and her medical board review pending, she needed the one person she had dismissed like an old coat hung behind a door. Her mother. But Eleanor had learned. Desperation doesn't always deserve response. At 4:42 p.m., Eleanor stepped out of the elevator, the heels of her shoes echoing against the marble of the now quiet clinic. Her presence was slow, deliberate, like a tide reclaiming shoreline. She wasn't here to take anything back. She was here to leave something behind. She walked through the halls Lisa had once paraded donors through. The walls, once adorned with photos of smiling patients and Lisa's staged resilience quotes, were stripped bare. A few plaques leaned on a desk nearby, waiting for rebranding. Eleanor reached Lisa's old office. The air was stale. The blinds were still drawn. She walked to the walnut desk, every inch of it a monument to someone else's ego. She opened the top drawer, then paused. Carefully, she unfolded a sheet of linen paper. It had only one sentence in bold black ink. "You ignored me in pain. I ignored you in profit." She slid it into the drawer and closed it gently, like lowering a headstone. Back in the lobby, she lingered for a second. Her hand brushed the reception counter she once donated to fund. Her name had never been engraved on the donor list. Now, it would be on the deed. The next morning, the calls changed tone. Lisa started with voicemails, choking sobs between apologies. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to get this far. Please, I need to talk." Then came the emails. Desperate, scattered, emotional. And finally, the text that made Eleanor pause. "I'm filing a motion against you. You left me no choice." She read it once. Then again. She didn't reply. Instead, she took her phone and scrolled to E. Summers' legal counsel and forwarded the message with 2 words. "Let's begin." But even now, Eleanor didn't move with fury. She moved with clarity. She stepped into her new role, not as a mother seeking reconciliation, but as a businesswoman reclaiming boundaries. Lisa thought the emergency would make Eleanor cave. She forgot that this time, Eleanor was the emergency. By noon, her lawyer's assistant called with the update. Lisa filed an intent to sue, claims emotional sabotage and financial misconduct. Her grounds are weak, but we'll handle it swiftly. Eleanor stood by the window of her home office. The city's skyline glimmered in the distance. Below, people moved in purpose and patterns. She sipped her tea. "Let her file it," she said. "It'll be her 3rd legal error this quarter." "Want us to respond today?" She glanced at her calendar. A community event at the clinic was scheduled, first under new ownership. Survivors were attending, caregivers, nurses, real people who deserved her time. "No," Eleanor said calmly. "Let her wait. Eleanor gets a call. Lisa is trying to sue her. She falsified records. I filed my own." The envelope slid across the polished conference table with a whisper, barely audible, but deafening in its weight. Inside it lay decades of quiet endurance, dates, dosages, declines. Every time Eleanor's voice had been brushed off as fatigue or dismissed as dramatics, she had written it down. In pen, neatly, relentlessly. Her pain chart, not the one the clinic faked, the real one. "I don't want sympathy," Eleanor said calmly, meeting her attorney's gaze. "I want accountability." Across from her, in a sleek blazer and modest heels, her lawyer, Angela Roslin, nodded and opened the envelope. She scanned page after page. A low breath escaped her lips as she reached the final entry. "Ignored request for anti-nausea meds. Again, 3:41 p.m. Heard Lisa laugh about me from the hallway." Angela looked up. "This isn't just negligence, Eleanor. It's criminal." Eleanor folded her hands. "Then let's file it as such." That same afternoon, the footage came next. Dozens of files, dates, timestamps. Nurse Amy's quiet voice recounting the moments she'd been asked to displace medication charts. Recordings of Lisa bragging that Eleanor's forgetfulness was convenient for the brand. And finally, the forged power of attorney Lisa had submitted, overlaid, side by side, with Eleanor's real signature from her hospital admin days. Different strokes, different style, same last name, No legal match. Angela's team didn't wait. They filed the lawsuit within 24 hours, but the DA's office took it further. Intentional elder abuse, fraud, identity misrepresentation. By the end of the week, news crews had stationed themselves outside the clinic. A headline scrolled across screens everywhere. Daughter accused of faking power of attorney, mother fights back. But by Monday, it changed. Mother turned mogul destroys daughter's lie. Real records. Real power. Inside the clinic's courtroom hearing, the walls felt closer than usual. Lisa sat stiffly in a charcoal suit, her mouth dry, her posture strained under fluorescent lights. She had stopped making eye contact with the press, with her staff, even with her own attorney. Across the aisle, Eleanor wore a deep navy coat and carried a canvas tote filled with originals. The pain journal, certified letters, banking statements, video logs, everything she'd once been too tired to recall. She handed them off one by one. Lisa's face paled as the judge's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Eleanor Jennings," the judge said at last, flipping through a stamped folder. "This documentation is extensive, meticulously organized." Eleanor smiled faintly. 30 years in hospital logistics. I was never confused, Your Honor, just patient." Lisa's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, citing unintentional administrative lapses. The judge didn't blink. "We don't call fraud a lapse." The gavel dropped once. "Motion to suspend Ms. Lisa Jennings from financial operations. Granted." Another drop. "Clinic assets to be placed under Eleanor Jennings' control pending full investigation." Lisa jolted upright. "You can't! She's manipulating this!" But the courtroom was already rising, moving, shifting away from her. She was no longer the one holding the clipboard or writing the charts. This wasn't her facility anymore. Back in the hallway, Eleanor stood quietly by the column outside courtroom 2B. Camera flashes went off, but she didn't react. A reporter stepped forward, breathless. "Ms. Jennings, do you have a comment on today's ruling?" Eleanor's voice was soft but steady. "Every wound I documented, they wrote off. Today I rewrote the chart. The court grants Eleanor full financial control of the clinic. She kept me isolated. Now I chose silence." The sign on the clinic's front door was simple. "No visitors allowed without proper clearance." It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't emotional. It was legal, approved, enforced. And Lisa stood in front of it, alone. Her coat flapped uselessly in the early morning wind, trying to look expensive, but threadbare where the cuffs had started to fray. Her makeup, once a pristine mask of confidence, had begun to crack along her jawline. In her hand, a manila folder held a resume she'd rewritten 3 times. But it didn't matter. Inside that clinic, her name was no longer spoken, unless followed by a legal warning. She reached for the handle. The door didn't budge. Behind the tinted glass, a young receptionist glanced up, recognized her, and picked up the phone without a word. Lisa stepped back. She wasn't even sure why she came anymore. Hope? Ego? Or the need to be seen? But she wasn't. Not anymore. Eleanor stood on the second floor, watching from the shadows behind a linen curtain, her posture straight, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't smile, but there was a certain stillness to her, like someone who had weathered a hurricane and was now watching the last gust of wind fizzle into nothing. "She's here again," the receptionist said quietly through the intercom. "I know," Eleanor replied. "Let her stand." The courtroom ruling had made it official. Lisa Jennings was barred from operating or owning any licensed medical facility in the state permanently. The violation of fiduciary trust, elder abuse, and forgery had compounded. Her license had been more than suspended. It had been revoked, not even appealable. And yet, she kept showing up. Later that week, Eleanor sat down at a board meeting. The new seats around the table weren't filled with investors in suits or aloof strategists. They were former nurses, a retired social worker, Amy, now leading the patient care committee, a domestic abuse survivor who once said Eleanor's case saved her life. At the head of the table sat Eleanor. "I don't want this board to look impressive," she said, glancing at each of them. "I want it to be healing." Applause, quiet, respectful, not performative. Eleanor passed out the updated revenue report. 30% of profits now earmarked for elder abuse prevention nonprofits across the region, programs for caregiver transparency, patient advocacy training, legal hotline development, all in Eleanor's name. The clinic had a new name too, the Jennings Foundation for Dignity in Care. They didn't even mention Lisa's name anymore. Outside, a journalist tried to interview Lisa as she walked down the sidewalk, folder still under her arm. "Do you feel your mother's actions were justified?" the reporter asked. Lisa scoffed, but her voice faltered. "She manipulated everything. I built that clinic." The reporter tilted her head. "But the property and funding were legally hers." Lisa didn't reply. She walked faster. The job rejection from the holistic spa the week before had stung, but not as much as the note attached. "Due to recent findings regarding your professional history, we are unable to proceed." She had submitted dozens of applications since. Most didn't respond. One responded with a forwarded article. "Daughter of medical mogul banned from practice. Former patient speaks out." Even the wellness industry wanted distance now. That night, Eleanor sat in her office upstairs. The room was warm, scented faintly with eucalyptus and polished wood. A photo of her late husband rested by the window. She touched it lightly, then tapped a pen against her planner. Across the hall, a soft knock. Amy peeked in. "You ready for your interview?" Eleanor nodded. 5 minutes. Amy smiled and paused. "By the way, Lisa tried applying to a detox spa in Oregon." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Did she? They called here for a reference?" "And?" Amy grinned. "I sent them the court transcript." Eleanor didn't laugh, but her silence said everything. Lisa applies for a job at a spa and is rejected. "They tried to erase me. I became the signature they couldn't remove." The new brass plaque gleamed in the sunlight, freshly mounted beneath the clinic's entry arch. Eleanor Wellness Foundation, Dignity in Care, founded 2023. It wasn't just a name change, it was a reclamation. The crowd outside shifted in quiet anticipation, not the buzzing chaos of past galas, but a respectful, heartfelt gathering of patients, former nurses, community organizers, and families whose faces wore something unfamiliar: hope. Inside, soft instrumental music floated through the halls. The harsh fluorescent bulbs that once buzzed coldly had been replaced with warm amber pendant lights. Gone were the glossy corporate posters. In their place hung canvas portraits, patients, volunteers, nurses, smiling, alive, and unfiltered. Eleanor stood just behind the curtain leading to the atrium stage. Her dress was navy, elegant and simple, accented by a silver pendant shaped like a heartbeat. Her hands trembled, not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of it all. Years of being treated like a burden, a footnote, a powerless patient. And now she stood as the founder of a movement. "Are you ready, Ms. Jennings?" asked Amy, clipboard in hand, wearing the same lavender scrubs Eleanor had insisted be part of the new standard, gentle on aging eyes and skin. Eleanor smiled softly. More than ever. The curtain parted. Applause rose, not frenzied or polite, but slow, deliberate, and deeply sincere. It felt like the rhythm of gratitude. She stepped forward. The podium bore her name now. She cleared her throat. "I used to wake up afraid of forgetting things," she began, voice steady but thick with meaning. "Not because I actually forgot, but because someone convinced me I did." Murmurs of agreement. Pain, as we know, is the body's warning, but silence, that's society's neglect. Today, we end both. Gasps. Applause again, louder this time. "We've launched low-cost geriatric care, caregiver support circles, mental health advocacy for the elderly, and a legal literacy program, so no one signs something they don't understand again." A group of women in the front row, many of them in their 60s and 70s, nodded with tears in their eyes. After the speech, Eleanor walked the halls with her board, past new therapy rooms, nutrition spaces, even a childcare wing for multi-generational caregivers. She stopped at a framed certificate outside the lab wing. It read, In memory of the ones silenced too soon. A subtle, silent dedication. Mike had sent flowers to the opening. They were left in the staff break room. No card was displayed. Lisa's name never came up. Later, as Eleanor sat beneath a tree outside the clinic, cool breeze brushing her cheek, scent of grass and new beginnings in the air, a young nurse approached, barely 25, nervous but wide-eyed. "Ms. Jennings?" she asked. Eleanor turned. "My name's Dana. My mom, she was a patient here 2 years ago. You probably don't remember." "I remember every patient," Eleanor said gently, her voice a blanket. Dana swallowed. "She almost didn't make it. But you filed something that forced Lisa to treat her right. You saved her." Eleanor didn't speak immediately. She just studied the girl, so young, so earnest. Then, quietly, "No," she saved herself. "I just left the light on." Dana handed her a letter, folded, trembling slightly. "What's this?" Eleanor asked. "My application. I want to intern here. I want to do it right." Eleanor took the letter with both hands, pausing to meet her eyes. "Then let's read it together." A young nurse approaches Eleanor. "You saved my mom. I was never just a patient. I was the blueprint." The soft hum of the afternoon light filtered through the wide glass panels of Eleanor's office, casting honeyed streaks across the polished wood floors. The windows overlooked the heart of the Eleanor Wellness Foundation, the very lobby she once limped through, invisible, unheard, underestimated. Now, patients walked in smiling. Staff greeted each person by name. Wheelchairs moved beside walkers, walkers beside strollers, generations all under one roof. Not a clinic, a haven. Eleanor sat in a cream armchair by the window. She wasn't hunched or fragile. She was poised, the curve of her spine straight, her chin lifted. A mug of herbal tea steamed gently in her hands. Lavender, just the way she liked it. On the wall behind her, freshly mounted, a brushed gold plaque etched with bold lettering, "Founder, Fighter, Force. Eleanor Jennings." She studied it for a long moment. Then she looked to her desk, where a framed copy of her pain journal rested, each page marked in her handwriting. It wasn't messy or bitter. It was clinical, calm, devastating in its detail, her own blueprint. A knock at the door. "Come in," Eleanor said, voice low, composed. Amy peeked inside. "They're ready for you." Eleanor nodded and stood, smoothing her blazer. Let's go give them the ending they didn't see coming. Downstairs, a small media crew was setting up. Cameras, microphones, a light ring casting halos on fresh paint. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s, composed with soft eyes, greeted Eleanor with respect, not pity. "Ms. Jennings," she began, "your story has inspired millions. Today, we want to ask, what do you want people to remember?" Eleanor didn't pause. "That pain," she said, "is not proof you're powerless. Sometimes it's proof you're still alive, and that's where change begins." She turned to the camera. Let it see the creases by her eyes. Let it see the quiet in her stillness. "I woke up in pain," she said. "Now I wake up with purpose." As the cameras shut off, applause echoed. Not from a crowd, but from the clinic's staff, nurses, volunteers, even former patients. They weren't cheering a speech. They were honoring a reckoning. Eleanor made her way back upstairs. Her heels clicked firmly against the stone steps. Each sound felt like punctuation. Back in her office, a courier envelope waited. She raised an eyebrow. Inside, a card, no return address, just one sentence written in sharp, familiar script. "You were always the problem. Now look what you've done. Lisa." No apology, no remorse, just ego, limping toward relevance. Eleanor slid the card into a drawer, locked it. She opened her filing cabinet and removed a single sheet, the transfer deed. The final ownership of the clinic was already hers. But what she did next would be the true inheritance. She pulled out a blank form and began filling in new board appointments, 2 retired nurses, 1 single mother from the community center, and Dana, the young intern whose mother Eleanor once saved. As she sealed the envelope, her phone pinged. An email. Subject: Today's hero, Eleanor Jennings to head National Elder Rights Task Force. She blinked, then smiled. The sun began its descent, draping golden ribbons across the floor. She rose and crossed the room, standing in front of her framed journal again. She touched the glass. "This was never just about me," she whispered. "This was about every woman told she was dramatic, every elder dismissed as slow, every voice labeled a burden." She turned, looking at the clinic one last time through the window. The lobby lights flickered on. A mother helped her father to the elevator. A nurse offered her arm to a patient too proud to ask. Life moved, gentle and full of grace. Eleanor walked to her desk, opened the top drawer, and placed the gold plaque beside the framed journal, the two side by side, like battle scars and medals. Then she turned to the small handheld recorder tucked in the corner, the one she used in the very beginning. She pressed play. Her own voice echoed back from months ago. Day 1. Pain. 7 out of 10. Disregarded again today. But I'm watching. Recording. I won't be erased. She let it play, then turned it off, and smiled. She thought I was silent, but I owned the last word, and the clinic.